Breath of the Wild did so much right, but if you think this is the highest peak the Zelda franchise will ever reach, then think again.
Since there are so many great things found in previous Zelda titles that Breath of the Wild totally dropped despite their potential of making the game even better. Our guess is that development of Hyrule, game design, engines, and organic approach took so much time that other ideas were left for the next Zelda title. A game that will not have to reinvent the wheel or conventions and rather benefit from the labor put into Breath of the Wild's engine. So make sure to leave a like, and if you are new, subscribe, as we head out with Patreon hero and fellow Zelda fanatic Holly Wolf to put down a few things that need to make their way to the next Zelda game after Breath of the Wild.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of After Breath of the Wild. This time we're going over the elements the next Zelda game needs. Well, it is a long list, so let's get straight into it, beginning with that the next Zelda game needs life. As a post-apocalyptic experience, Breath of the Wild sometimes outmatched the likes of Fallout 4, but the next Zelda needs less post-apocalyptia and rather more color and quirky vibrancy that fits a fantasy setting. Pretty much everything we loved in past Zelda titles. And by that, we mean that the next Zelda game needs to restore the Zelda magic. And no, we don't mean the magic meter or bar, they could bring back that as well, but rather the fantasy elements that truly put the legend off inside Zelda. It is the same type of magic as the famous Disney magic, and to some extent, the world in Breath of the Wild just felt a little too realistic at times. So we need a little more spice, character, or if you prefer, personality.
We believe that the key to success lays in fantasy elements like magic forests that are not as restricted as the Lost Woods were in Breath of the Wild, and overall fresh locations, settlements, towns, and colorful characters with such as Yito and Yetta, or anyone in Majora's Mask that are not predictable years ahead of launch. In other words, it is better if the next Zelda game is not set in Hyrule, or at least not only set in Hyrule. Say that parts of the game take place in a neighboring kingdom or country, no Dark World or Low Rule, but rather something brand new. And this is rather fitting, seeing that of the Zelda games developed by the Zelda team at Nintendo EAD and now EPD, only one, Termina, have taken place outside of what can be considered Hyrule.
The most preferable option is to have another adventure similar to the Hero of Time's involuntary quest in Termina. That will say a brand new adventure outside of Hyrule so that we have a whole new world to explore, just like Hyrule in Breath of the Wild, but with no prior knowledge of the location. A brand new land, provinces, and unknown locations to discover, places that we would never be able to guess. While we desire to be surprised and awed, we still wish to explore Hyrule in its golden age. What to do?
I know! Begin the game with Hyrule at its peak. Let players explore Hyrule Castle and town, and perhaps even complete some side quests or even a dungeon, before, just as we are visiting with Zelda in the castle, an invasion from a neighboring land takes place. Link as a knight and hero is called to arms, but is swiftly defeated and brought as prisoner of war to a different land. There your objective is to make your way back to your beloved homeland Hyrule, by means of resistance, combat, exploration, and obviously solving puzzles and conquering dungeons in order to get closer to Hyrule and the uprising that will restore Hylian sovereignty. Which brings us over to the next field of improvement.
The Divine Beasts were okay as part of a dungeon, but as full-scale dungeons, they simply failed to live up to the standards set by previous Zelda dungeons, and we want those back. The solution doesn't get more straightforward than this. Traditional dungeons with unique and mind-blowing themes, designs, and interiors. We want more sand ships, ancient cisterns, snow peak ruins, and stone tower temples. And then we can combine some of these with Divine Beast-like mechanical puzzles or puzzle boxes. Let the beasts be a one-time gimmick that doesn't return, as they failed in one massive way before you entered them. namely surprise. Not knowing the dungeon before you enter it is part of the Zelda magic that we were missing in Breath of the Wild, and the key is to first be surprised by a dungeon. With this first key in place, it is easier to get immersed in it and finally challenged with clever puzzles. Yes, a large number and variety of dungeons will require less shrines, so why not make these more interesting with different interior designs instead of the beautiful but incredibly repetitive ancient Sheikah and Japanese Jomon inspired design?
In a large extent, the same principle applies to the bosses. Variety is key, and we need more type of surprise bosses like the superb Monk Maz Koshia boss fight. Now back to the issue of predictability, or more specifically, lack of variety. In Breath of the Wild, there are two main side objectives: shrines and Korok seeds. We don't count the Master Sword and the memories among these, since they are part of the main quest and required in order to get the true ending of the game. Alright, so we have already addressed how to resolve the overabundance of shrines. Now it's time for the Korok seeds. To say it frank, a similar collectible could return, but instead of 900 pieces of plant poop and one giant golden turd, have say 300 collectibles of 3 different kinds that serve radically different purposes. No one should endure the level of torture completionists had to go through in Breath of the Wild, and please reward the player for their dedication and determination. That's all.
Now onto the fact that the next Zelda needs much better storytelling. Just because you have an open air doesn't mean that you should have non-linear storytelling. The problem in Breath of the Wild was that you didn't feel as part of the story being told, since you were so disconnected from the events that transpired 100 years prior, and not where you are right now. A good story in video games can contain flashbacks or memories, but these shouldn't dominate, since as the player you want to be part of the story that unfolds in front of you. Specifically, feel like there's some urgency to the situation there and then, not watch salvage clips from 100 years prior. To illustrate how poorly the memories were conveyed in Breath of the Wild and lost potential, then take this. Imagine if the memories from the past along with the cutscenes had an amazing and immersive gameplay section leading up to each cutscene. That would be great, or even better.
Don't tell the story of the past, but rather the present. History is great, but when you create it yourself, it is so much better. History in the making and a story that gradually unfolds based on your in-game actions will make for a better story. That and key characters that follow you throughout. Not only fragments of this story from beginning to end. Not being able to interact with Zelda outside of cutscenes was a real bummer, and the lack of connection among the people of Hyrule and you building up to the showdown against Ganon was also a letdown. Guess the last 100 years had made them used to the danger, so they couldn't care less.
Over to lesser gameplay enhancements, which we for the sake of your time will list down in a rapid fashion. First and foremost, the next Zelda needs underwater swimming. It was present in Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, but for some reason not in Breath of the Wild. And that despite that it had the greatest pools of water ever. Come on Enuma, just bring them back. Next, we need rain to only make it harder, not impossible to climb. Some of the mechanics in Breath of the Wild cause some excruciating waiting times for the weather to change or the Master Sword to recharge, which brings us to...
The next Zelda game needs weapons, shields, and items with stronger durability. Not eternal weapons, but rather long-lasting ones than what was the case in Breath of the Wild. And then along these enhancements, offer us the option to repair damaged weapons. As for items, they need a greater purpose, and perhaps be exempt from the breakable rule. The Sheikah runes should return, but perhaps instead of being handed at the beginning of the game, be granted at the midpoint within dungeons. Say that the first half of the dungeon doesn't require said rune item or ability, while the second half and then the rest of the open air overworld will make great use of it.
Our final lesser enhancement is that the next game needs to make a greater use of the music and soundtrack. The Breath of the Wild soundtrack is solid, but heavily underused, even from an organic perspective. This has to change to some extent for the next Zelda game, as we can't end up in the situation where the best theme made for the game isn't even in the game, but rather Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That is not okay. And when we are on the subject of music, can we make music once again part of the gameplay? Say that we use an instrument to put certain enemies to sleep or distract them.
We are down to our final need for the next Zelda game that isn't tied to returning elements. we will dedicate a separate video for that. The next Zelda game should be a follow-up to Breath of the Wild, where we once again play as the hero of the wild. We never got the post-game we craved for, and we want to see Link and Zelda of the Wild once again. Besides, all of the aforementioned improvements will become so much more visible and comparable if we experience them with the same Link. Obviously, a different Link would also work, but then again, we are likely to once again be stuck in Hyrule, while having another adventure with the hero of the wild will most certainly take place in a new location for us to explore. And there you have it. Our list of things the next Zelda game needs to destroy Breath of the Wild and make best use of the freed up space that the game engine would otherwise take. Putting together this list took lots of effort from all of us, and we would greatly appreciate that you leave a like, and if you are new, subscribe and press that notification bell for all notifications regarding our Zelda 33 uploads, as we count down to the 33rd anniversary of the Zelda franchise on February 21st.
Finally, we want to thank our Patreon hero Holy Wolf for joining us in this video, plus all other patrons, and in particular royal producer Kenyatta Ali for their financial support to the realm. You can join them too on patreon.com/commonrealm, and as a Patreon hero or royal producer, join one of our future uploads. Until our next uploads every Monday, Wednesday and Saturday, this was the Commonwealth Realm, and we will see you girls and guys soon.